With the 12th pick in the 2020 NBA Draft, the Sacramento Kings select Tyrese Haliburton from Iowa State University.
It's hard to believe that it's now been over 2 years since the last time that the 2020 NBA Draft took place, and as you can see on that historic night, Tyrese Haliburton was selected 12th overall by the Sacramento Kings out of Iowa State. Little did anyone know, especially the Sacramento Kings at the time, that they did not only select arguably the best point guard from that entire draft, but potentially one of the most impactful young guards in the NBA for the near future. As the entire NBA gets ready to begin its 2022-2023 season, so does Haliburton, in a brand new situation with the Indiana Pacers after a midseason trade this past year, a blockbuster, if you will, that happened at last year's NBA trade deadline. It's hard to believe that a young player of his impact at just 22 years old, still on his rookie deal, finds himself in a brand new setting. But how did we all get here, and how did Tyrese Haliburton, who has been one of the most promising young players in the NBA to watch over the last number of seasons, get moved so early on in his career? Although his NBA career has started off with blazing success, things did not exactly go the way of Tyrese in terms of notoriety coming out of high school. In his days at Oshkosh North High School in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, Haliburton was just the third highest recruited player coming out of his high school graduation class in the state of Wisconsin. Although he did rise through the ranks after growing 3 inches going into his senior year of high school and exploded onto the high school scene, he was offered just 7 Division I offers spanning across the Big 12 by the time he graduated during his senior year. His first Division I offer, now looking back at it in retrospect, is actually borderline hilarious. Coming from IUPUI University, also known as Indiana University, Purdue University, Indiana, which happens to be known as the worst Division I basketball program in the entire country. Haliburton would, of course, eventually go on and thrive as an Iowa State Cyclone. In Tyrese's 2 years at Iowa State, he saw tremendous leaps going from his freshman to sophomore seasons, where he nearly saw his points per game double from 6 to 15.5, his assist total from 3.5 to 6.5, and his steals go from 1.5 to 2.6 a game in his sophomore season. Those numbers were good enough to earn him Big 12 All-Conference honors right before he eventually declared for the 2020 draft. Despite many draft experts at the time not exactly sure how the unorthodox shooting motion of Haliburton could translate to the league, that definitely did not turn them away from his mastery of the pick and roll, his wonderful IQ on the court, and his 6'10" wingspan as a point guard to eventually land him with the 12th overall pick. Haliburton was brought in to start almost immediately alongside De'Aaron Fox, who was just given a rookie max contract extension the offseason before. The Kings front office thought that there would be no problem, and Haliburton, who spent time on the ball and off of it at Iowa State, to play off of the young star in Fox. The Sacramento Kings entered the 2020-21 NBA season with very little expectations to most NBA fans. However, one thing that was a bright spot for the Kings, despite finishing 10 games under 500, was the excellence of their young point guard. Haliburton, who would eventually go on over 58 games and 20 starts for Sacramento in his rookie campaign, finished with splits of 13 points, 5 assists, and 3.5 rebounds per game. Haliburton most notably thrived when he was put into the starting role towards the latter end of the season after a end-of-the-season injury to shooting guard starter and Buddy Hield. Haliburton stepped in wonderfully and would eventually go on to average close to 18 points per game over his final 20 games of his rookie season. Tyrese would eventually go on to be named an all-rookie second-team member and actually had the second most assists per game, the second most steals, and the second best three-point percentage, only behind Desmond Bane of his rookie class. Fast forward to the 2021 NBA draft, and there was a lot of speculation on who the Kings could have possibly selected. However, Sacramento eventually would settle on once again another guard, which was a head-scratcher at the time, in selecting Davion Mitchell from the University of Baylor. The head-scratching move wasn't the talent of Mitchell that was very relevant, as he eventually would lead the Baylor Bears to a 2021 NCAA championship. It was the fact that Fox and Haliburton were both coming off of excellent seasons, and there was no question that they were the two most talented players on the Sacramento roster. So questions started to pop up on whether Fox was truly happy in Sacramento and what the Kings would possibly do with now 3 lottery picks going into their guard rotation going forward. After a very underwhelming start once again to a season for Sacramento, the third-year head coach and Luke Walton was given the boot after just a 6-11 start to the Kings season. Alvin Gentry was promoted in his place and was thought to bring a positive influence to this Kings ball club. Unfortunately for Gentry and the rest of the Sacramento roster, they continue to plummet down the Western Conference standings. Fast forward to the end of January, keep in mind right around 2 weeks before the 2022 NBA trading deadline, the Kings found themselves in 13th place in the Western Conference, 16 games under 500 at 20-36 at the time, and 3 games back of a second spot in the NBA play-in tournament. It seemed like every Kings core player was having a down year except for the second-year guard in Haliburton. Tyrese actually improved his points per game, assists per game, rebounds per game, and steals per game all across the board going into his sophomore campaign. As a matter of fact, going into the NBA trading deadline, Haliburton actually paced all second-year players in assists, steals, and win shares. Yes, you heard that right. Tyrese Haliburton at the time at the trade deadline was a more valuable and more winning player to his ball club than a player such as Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball. Now, you would think on the surface that Sacramento might want to hold on to that player for a long time going forward. Well, in typical Kings fashion, they decided to do the impossible and ship off Haliburton at the trade deadline. The Indiana Pacers and Sacramento Kings decided to agree upon a deal just an hour before the trade deadline expired that was a blockbuster that sent shockwaves throughout the NBA world.
Make it make sense, Zach. Make it make sense.
Originally, the rumors were De'Aaron Fox for a Domantas Sabonis swap, but instead, the Kings wanted to continue to build around their longtime point guard and decided to ship off the second-year guard in Haliburton instead, who many people could argue is having a better all-around season than Fox in just his second year. The official trade ended up being Haliburton alongside teammates Buddy Hield and Tristan Thompson going to Indiana for two-time All-Star Domantas Sabonis and wing players in Jeremy Lamb and Justin Holiday. Still, at the time of this recording, many months later after the fact, and even in hindsight at the time, jaws were hitting the floor and many people cannot begin to speculate on why Sacramento would make a quote-unquote all-in move for a team that wasn't even in a play-in tournament spot at the time of the trade. To try and make sense of this Kings move at the time still, to me, does not make sense whatsoever. Of course, pairing a two-time All-Star in Sabonis with a rising guard like De'Aaron Fox does make sense at the time on the surface, but once you really break down the rest of the Sacramento roster for the final 25 games going forward for the rest of that season, there's nothing but question marks. Harrison Barnes and Davion Mitchell were the only other two slightly above average players for the Kings on their roster at the time. And as you can figure, Sacramento would eventually go on to finish 10-15 in their final 25 games in the Fox and Sabonis era, moving up one spot to the 12th seed and once again now missing their 15th straight postseason appearance. Looking at things from Indiana's perspective, this is the equivalent of getting away with cold-blooded murder in broad daylight. The Pacers were able to get the 21-year-old Haliburton on club control on his rookie contract until 2024, and Buddy Hield, who was also on a very club-friendly deal, actually sees his contract go down up until the 2024 season. So they have their point guard and shooting guard of the future, and for this Indiana ball club, despite not having great results team-wise for their final 25 games of the 2021-22 season, they did see some all-star level production out of Haliburton. Those numbers on the screen in front of you typically don't come from any second-year players throughout the league. 17.5 points per game and NBA leading. Yes, you heard that right. NBA best 9.6 assists per game for his final 25 games of the season on 50, 42, and 85 shooting splits. Haliburton's 59% true shooting percentage also was the highest for any guard in those 26 games to end the season. Haliburton would eventually go on to finish with a 58.5% true shooting percentage. Only Luke Kennard, Seth Curry, Josh Hart, and Grayson Allen had a higher true shooting percentage than Haliburton did last season. You can easily make the case with Tyrese playing more minutes than any of those 5 names that were just mentioned, that Tyrese was the most efficient guard shooting the basketball in the entire NBA last year. The Indiana Pacers are still light years away from contention in the Eastern Conference. With the dark cloud of mediocrity now passing through this Pacers franchise, a hard reset has begun for Indiana going forward. With the recent offseason trade of Malcolm Brogdon and TJ Warren signing a free agent deal with the Brooklyn Nets, the keys have now been given to the 22-year-old Tyrese Haliburton to carry this Pacers franchise going forward. The help is not exactly bountiful for this Pacers roster right now, but with a lot of cap space going forward in the near future and some promising young talent, such as Terry Taylor, Chris Duarte, and recent lottery pick in Benedict Mathurin, the future does seem bright in Indiana. The usage rate should continue to excel for Haliburton going into his third season in the NBA. Don't be surprised, ladies and gentlemen, if Haliburton has a potential 2010 season in the near future, despite it being a loaded guard talent pool in the Eastern Conference. Haliburton is certainly not too far away from cracking his first All-Star season in the NBA and looks to prove to be one of the best young players in the league going forward. If you have made it up to this point in the video today, do yourself a favor and drop a like and subscribe, as it will help me and the rest of the channel grow tremendously going forward. Until then, guys, I will catch you on the next one.